بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا وحبيب قلوبنا وطبيب نفوسنا أبا القاسم مصطفى محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين. وأما بعد، السلام عليكم جميعا ورحمة الله. I'd like to begin by congratulating you all on the occasion of the birth anniversary of a lady who has become the symbol of patience and perseverance. I'm speaking about Sayyidah Zainab Salamullah alayh. It's her birth anniversary today, and that means cake and kahoot for us, alhamdulillah. To begin tonight's program, I'd like to call upon Brother Sajjad to enlighten our hearts with verses of the Holy Quran with a loud salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ألف لام ميم. ذلك الكتاب لا ريب فيه هدى للمتقين الذين يؤمنون بالغيب ويقيمون الصلاة ومما رزقناهم ينفقون والذين يؤمنون بما أنزل إليك وما أنزل من قبلك وبالآخرة هم يوقنون أولئك على هدى من ربهم وأولئك هم المفلحون. إن الذين كفروا سواء عليهم أنذرتهم أم لم تنذرهم لا يؤمنون. ختم الله على قلوبهم وعلى سمعهم وعلى أبصارهم غشاوة ولهم عذاب عظيم. ومن الناس من يقول آمنا بالله وباليوم الآخر وما هم بمؤمنين يخادعون الله والذين آمنوا وما يخدعون إلا أنفسهم وما يشعرون. في قلوبهم مرض فزادهم الله مرضا ولهم عذاب أليم بما كانوا يكذبون. وإذا قيل لهم لا تفسدوا في الأرض قالوا إنما نحن مصلحون. ألا إنهم هم المفسدون ولكن لا يشعرون. وإذا قيل لكم آمنوا كما آمن الناس قالوا أنؤمن كما آمن السفهاء ألا إنهم هم السفهاء ولكن لا يعلمون وإذا لقوا الذين آمنوا قالوا آمنا وإذا خلوا إلى شياطينهم قالوا إنا معكم إنما نحن مستهزئون الله يستهزئ بهم ويمدهم في طغيانهم يعمهون أولئك الذين اشتروا الضلالة بالهدى فما ربحت تجارتهم وما كانوا مهتدين صدق الله العلي العظيم صلوات على محمد وآل محمد
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
Thank you very much, Brother Sajjad, for that beautiful recitation. May Allah bless you both in this life and the next, inshallah. Please recite aloud salawat for his well-being.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
Sisters, the chairs, people put effort to put them out there for you. If you could please take a seat there, would be, I think, easier for the shiur to actually make some engagement with you guys on the chairs rather than around the perimeter. So keep that in mind. I highly doubt they'll actually listen to me, but I tried. So for the main part of tonight's program, we're lucky again to have two sheikhs tonight. The discussion tonight between Sheikh Hamid and Sheikh Ali will be about, well, the question is, will my brain tell me to obey God, or would my brain tell me to obey God? So please welcome our dear shuyukh with three of your loudest salawats ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
Fancy tablecloth.
Yeah, it's fine. I just have to apparently get on the Zoom call. Yeah, you start while I say this up.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا أبو القاسم محمد.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين. Assalamu alaikum everyone. As always, an honor and a privilege to be here amongst you. Alhamdulillah, we're celebrating the birth of Sayyidah Zainab Salamun alayha. Send my congratulations to everyone on her birthday. The topic that was chosen was can we rationally argue that God should be obeyed? So that would mean using rational arguments that are not scriptural, so not using Quran, not using Hadith, and just trying to argue whether or not we should be obeying Allah, which obviously we should, but we'll try to justify it. So I think Sheikh Ali brought three arguments to justify why we should, or I think you put four, but the third and the fourth are pretty much the same.
Yeah, just three.
But why you should obey God. First one, why don't you explain what the first one is, Sheikh?
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم السلام عليكم brothers and sisters. Eid Mubarak on the Walada of Sayyida Zainab Salamullahi alayha. And this is an interesting question because we have, for example, a verse of the Quran. We have this type of wording in many other parts of the Quran as well. I just brought one example where Allah says, essentially, obey me. Ati'u Allah wa ati'u Rasul. Obey Allah and obey the Messenger. Then, well, you ask yourself, why do I have to obey God? And then if you say, because the Quran says so, then it becomes circular. Because God is saying, obey me, and then you're asking, why should I obey God? And then you're saying, because God said so. So it becomes a circular argument. So this phrase in the Quran, obey me or obey Allah, needs to have a justification outside of religion itself, outside of the faith itself. And that's what we're trying to uncover, rational justifications for why we need to obey God. On first encounter, it sounds like a very simple question. You probably, when you saw the title, you're like, oh, this is really obvious, why are we discussing this? But as you will see, it has some flavor to it. There's some interesting detail that we can discuss. And what's even more interesting is this question is after we submit to the idea that a creator, a God exists. We say, okay, God exists. We accept that the universe must have been created, someone was behind this, an intelligent, powerful being was behind this. But why on earth do I have to listen to him? That's the key question. Even if I believe in a God, as some scientists do, as famously it's been said that Einstein believed in a creator. It's a school of thought called deism, where you believe in a creator, but you don't necessarily follow a religion, or you don't necessarily follow supposed commands of this creator. So the question is interesting, because we usually forget that gap. We think, well, because God created us, therefore we should obey him, which is interestingly one of the arguments that we'll begin with. The first argument, which we can call God's right to obedience, is fundamentally based on the idea of rights and responsibilities. Before we get into the argument itself, it's worthwhile discussing what a right is, what are the sources of rights, how do we enact them in society, and what makes them binding upon us to follow. So there has been given different definitions for what a right is and what it includes and excludes, but what we can simply say, when someone has a right to something, then in relation to me, or I in relation to them, ought to do something or not do something. If I have a right to privacy, then you are not allowed, you ought not to invade that privacy, and vice versa. So a right is always based and built on a relationship between two things. That could be a person and a thing, could be between two people, whatever there is. A right is a relationship that establishes an ought to or ought not to statement between the two of them. And rights have different sources. We have civil rights, we have religious rights, we have social rights. People fight for their rights, we make new rights, we think of new ones, we get rid of old ones. Back when the idea of and the concept and the phenomena and essentially the practice of slavery was around, there was the idea of slaves' rights. Even though the slavery is to us a very detestable, currently in today's society, and rightfully so, is a rather detestable phenomenon. Nonetheless, the slave had a right, but that has completely been nullified because of the nullification of slavery. There's no such thing as a slavery, therefore there's no such thing as the rights of a slave. Now, some rights, as we said, come from religion. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the God of the Bible, the God of the Old Testament, or whatever religion we have, has set down certain rights that this is how the relationship between, say, a husband and wife is to be governed. This is how the relationship between the ruler and the people should be governed. And then we have rights where people get together and decide it. You know, in parliaments, that's essentially what they discuss. Laws are enacting rights for certain entities and disproving rights for other entities. And finally, this is why we're giving this elaborate explanation on what a right is we have a class of rights that neither God tells us, neither religion tells us, which is the same thing essentially, neither society tells us or governments tell us, but we feel it ourselves. There is if you like, an intuition, a moral intuition, in which we understand that we are obliged to do something. Even if we had no religion, even if we had no civil government, even if we had no prime minister, even if John Howard wasn't here to tell us, or what's the guy that's the premier right now, we have to wear masks, or it's your right to your privacy and what have you, you still would know that I have to do this thing with respect to the other person. Mutual respect is probably one of those things. If someone respects you, you automatically have this innate intuition that you should respect that person in return. Now, this argument we're going to discuss is essentially based on that. It says, very simply, in 3 propositions or 3 premises. Firstly, it says God is our creator. Like we said in the beginning, we've already passed the idea that God exists. We accept, yes, there is a God. In one way or another, we accept that He exists. The second premise says, well, a creator has a very, very special position in this universe. For one, He is the only one that is taking that position. There is only one creator. There is no one else that can be classified and nominated as the creator of the universe. There's only one God, going on that assumption. And given that He is very special, He is the only person taking that position of creatorship, if you like. And He has brought us to this life. We were naught, we were nothing. We had no idea of what life is, what experience is, what it means to be alive. Then He brought us to life. That's an important thing He has done. He's our creator. And because of that, every creator of this caliber, I'm not talking about I building a table. Yeah, I'm technically a creator, but compare me, my creation, and God's creation. God creates from nothing, in a sense, whereas I just have to reassemble. I have to reorganize what already is created, what is already in the universe, to then call it a new creation. But in reality, I haven't created anything new. I have just reorganized creation and then given it a new name. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or God, is special that He creates from nothing. Okay, so premise 2 says, every creator, especially God being in the status and caliber He has, needs to be obeyed. And finally, ignoring someone's right is morally wrong. Ignoring someone's right is morally wrong. And by morally wrong, we mean those intuitions you have about intuitions you have about rights. We said, there's different class of rights. There's that intuitive sense of rights we have to do something, moral rights and wrongs. Well, this is one. If God has created us, then He deserves to be listened to. We deserve to take His commands seriously and obey them. This is essentially called the theory of, in Arabic they say حق الطاعة, which means the right to obedience. And it has used by a variety of scholars in different fields of theology and usul and what have you. I wonder if you have any comments on this, Sheikh.
Well, obviously I agree with it, so I don't want to, I'll play devil's advocate, but I'm going to put a disclaimer, I don't disagree. Couple of the number 2 and number 3 have to be proven though, right? So yes, on the assumption that we accept Allah exists and He's our creator, which is what you started with, so that step's already been established, and now we're looking at, since there is a God, do we need to worship this God, or do we need to obey this God? Now the second step is, every creator has a right to be obeyed. So you mentioned the grand status of God as being a creator, that He's able to create from nothing, and how amazing that is, which it is amazing. But why does that necessitate obedience, right? So what's the relationship between God being able to create us and us needing to obey Him? Right, so it seems like possibly those are two separate statements that have nothing to do with one another. I'm sure you could link them, but that's one problem. Second one, ignoring someone's right is morally wrong. Again, that needs to be proven. Obviously, in the majority of cases that would be true, but there are exceptions. So the right to liberty, for instance, is taken away when someone commits a crime, so we infringe upon that right, and we're not giving him that right. We're ignoring that right because of some reason, right? So and also there'll be conflicting rights as well, where observing one right will be ignoring another one. Now, does number 3, when in relation to Allah, does that mean we have to obey Him in all cases, or are there exceptions as well, right? And then, so for C, the conclusion to be correct, we have to kind of elaborate on 2 and 3, I think.
Yeah, I think 3 already takes in the idea of what you mentioned. Why do we sometimes ignore people's rights? Because there is a greater right we have to take into consideration.
Yeah.
When we infringe on someone's right to freedom and liberty, a criminal that is, and we put them in prison and don't allow them to have access to the outside world, it's because they were infringing on other people's rights. So we have a very good reason to do so, and intuition can tell us. So number 3 would be ignoring someone's right is morally wrong when there is no better reason, or where there's no good reason to do so. So that you're right, there should be a appendix we should add to that. But your objection to number 2 seems very valid, okay? Because there is a creator, why do we still have to follow him, right? There is almost a fitri, an innate feeling that we should, and maybe that is itself a separate, independent reason that we have been created with this innate reason to always, and we discussed this before when it came to the topic of fitra, that we have this inclination to listen to Allah and gravitate towards our creator. But is there really, like you were saying, a necessary relationship between creatorship and obedience? Just because Allah is our creator, why does it necessitate that we have to follow Him? I think that's a valid objection that's also being raised.
Yeah. There's other ways to look at it as well. So if we take creator out of the picture, and we're not worshiping God or obeying God because He's creator, we're obeying God because of the collection of attributes that He has. So an entity who has these qualities should be obeyed because He's wise, because He's, like, if we accept all of them and we accept that He's given us these instructions for us, right? Then it makes sense to obey Him. Not just because He's a creator, that's just one aspect of Him. Right? But when we put all of it together and the reason why He gave us these rules, that makes sense.
Yes,
right? So clinging on the creator might be the issue.
That could make it easier to digest. But even then, I think there is some room. But you're right, it makes it more easier to digest that if Allah is our creator, He's wise, He essentially owns us, He always gives us blessings, so on and so forth, then He deserves to be listened to.
And that's kind of leading into the next one.
Yes, exactly.
There is a question that's up. Why would I have to obey the Creator? Can I just not? And would God obliterate me otherwise? So we'll get to that one. That will be the third argument.
Yes.
So we will touch upon that in the future, hopefully.
Okay. The second reason, or the second argument we have, is something that's referred to as, in Arabic, there's a typo there in Arabic. It should be shukrul mun'im. Mun'im comes from ni'mah. We heard that. You can't ignore that. Sorry, I'm just putting you on the spot. Mun'im comes from ni'mah, which means blessing. Shukrul mun'im means showing gratitude, appreciation to whoever gives you blessing. And we have a commonly recited verse of the Quran, هَلْ جَزَاءُ الْإِحْسَانِ إِلَّا الْإِحْسَانِ. Is it not the reward and the what you will do in return for goodness done to you to be goodness? Is the reward of goodness anything but goodness? So Allah once again challenges that moral intuition that whoever shows us goodness, shows us a form of blessing, then we ought to have a level of gratitude and appreciation for what's done to us. And we should do the same in return to the capacity that we can. Here, to put the argument once again in a very syllogistic format, so we can see exactly what's being discussed here. A, God continuously gives us blessings. He continuously sustains our life. He gives us, if you look, He gives us health, He gives us wealth, He gives us family, He gives us moments of happiness. He tests us with moments of difficulty so we may grow. Every area of life we look at, there is a form of blessing coming from this God, from this Creator. So premise one, there's no way we could argue against that. Premise two is once again this moral intuition that being ungrateful, being unthankful to Allah, who is being nice to us, if you like, every moment of our lives, is morally wrong. If I was in every moment of your life giving you $100, every minute I'm going to give you $100. Every minute you're going to feel very blessed. You're going to feel that you owe me at least a thank you, that I'm doing this for no reason. It's not because you have done something. You're not working for me. There is no nested interest for me. I just feel like I like the way you look. I'm going to give you $100 every minute. And the least you feel like, you can't even hold it in. It's an innate feeling once again that you have to say thank you. You want to do your best to return that favor. Even if they did it even if you did not ask for it. You still have this idea to thank the person who continuously blesses you every moment of your life, every minute gives you $100, $200, $1,000, what have you, for the rest of your life. You feel obliged somehow inside to return that blessing. And so if Allah is doing that, God is doing that every minute of our life, then it makes sense to obey Him. And this obedience is a form of appreciation. Thoughts, Shaykh Allah?
So again, I agree with that, yeah, but I'll play devil's advocate. So obviously it's, yes, Allah gives us blessings. I can't argue against that. Although there are hardships in life, but that's another discussion for another day. Number two, being unthankful to someone who gives you blessings is morally wrong. I'll accept that as well, no issues there. Number three, thanking God is to obey Him. That's where I think there's a question maybe.
Room for discussion.
And because number two says being unthankful, and number three says thanking God. Those are two different things, right? So if I don't obey God, is that being unthankful, or is that just not being thankful? Right? Are they necessary opposites, or is there like a middle ground? Right? That's one question. Two, why is obedience in place of thanking? Right? So if you gave me, a house or some big blessing, some big gift, and I said thank you, and I truly appreciated it through my words, and expressed my gratitude to you, and heartfelt gratitude to you, that would be enough. It wouldn't be that I have to now follow your script of how I should live my life and do every little thing that you want me to do because you gave me a house, right? Obviously Allah gives us much more, right? And maybe it's because of the magnitude of the blessings that Allah gives us, then that changes the discussion. But why isn't, an expression of, heartfelt gratitude sufficient to fall under this? Why do we have to obey Him in everything and to be able to be thankful?
I think the best way to answer that is, how can we be thankful? If someone was to bless us with money, is being thankful simply expressing gratitude with words? Or is being thankful using that wealth in the best way possible? It seems that to truly be thankful and appreciating of whatever blessing someone has given you is to use it in the best format possible. If it's money, then you go buy a house, invest, multiply, grow, become rich. If someone is giving you their time, then you also in return make sure their time is used in the best way possible. So thanking possibly cannot be reduced to words. We don't even really consider that as the true meaning of thanking sometimes. When we do something for someone, we want them to use that blessing in the best way possible. So maybe what we can say is, when Allah gives us blessings, and we have to use those blessings in the best way possible, and that's what thanking means, Allah then sends a manual for us to be able to do the best thanking. So He isn't giving out orders for the sake of benefiting Him, but He's like, hey guys, I did something really good to you, and I continuously seem to do so, and you really like it. And there is something inside you that says, you want to thank me, you want to do something in return. The best way to thank, as you would also agree, is to use these blessings, use your health, use your wealth, use your familial relationships, use your intelligence, use your time, use your youth in the best way possible. Do you want to know how that's done? Here is a bunch of commands and orders. Follow these instructions, and then you would have used these opportunities and blessings in the best way possible, and hence you would have been you would have been grateful to me. I think that would be one way to formulate this argument to maybe account for what you said.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, let's move on. I don't want to.
I know you don't.
Pick on that too
no,
much,
of course, good. These are all very good arguments. None of us disagree with the true spirit behind them. But we're trying to be as critical as possible, as Shaykh is also being, and so we can find the best way to put these. If we are, for example, talking, first of all, these benefit us, by the way. First and foremost, it benefits us because it uncovers our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to a deeper level. But also, given that we live in a non-Muslim society, these are very valuable ways of thinking to give to others and present to them. Maybe you can. You can explain Pascal's wager, and then I can explain the argument if you like.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, Pascal's wager is basically, actually it's a little different than the other ones, because the first premise is not there anymore, that right now we don't believe God exists anymore. So Pascal's coming at a state where one is unable to determine whether God exists or doesn't exist. Right? And that's important. So it's kind of at a 50-50 type position.
That's right.
Where, there's a possibility He exists, there's a possibility He doesn't exist. I don't know. So now what's my duty here? What should I do? Mm-hmm. And then he says, in this case, because you're in that state of uncertainty, it's kind of like flipping a coin, right? Whether He exists or doesn't exist. Now I want to look at the benefits of accepting whether he exists and the harms of denying his existence, right? And he shows that, yep, if God does exist and I believe in him, right, and I obey him, right, let's not just say believe, but if God exists and I obey him, I live my life as a religious person should. And when he's introducing this, he says, kind of not pretending, but it's not true belief here. It's, I'm going to live my life as someone who does exist.
Act like God exists.
Act like God exists, yeah. So in that case, you get all the rewards, because if you do what God wants and he actually does exist, then you get eternal blessings in heaven. So you get everything, limitless bounties. And if he doesn't exist, right, you acted as if he did exist, but he actually didn't exist, you don't lose much. He doesn't say zero, right? But you lose minimal things. You lose a few pleasures. You lose a few things you could have done that you didn't, right? But not much. It's minimal compared to eternal blessings. Then the opposite side, if God, if you disbelieve and you say, I'm not going to act as if God believes. I'm going to do whatever I want and live my life, without God. Then if he did exist, the consequence of that is eternal punishment, right? So it's a very severe negative consequence. And if he didn't exist, the benefits are minimal. You engaged in a few pleasures that you wouldn't have otherwise, right? So it's not much benefit, but there's that huge risk of harm, right? And he's saying a rational person here would state that, look, I'm going to, act as if God exists, and if he did, great, I get all those rewards. If he didn't, okay, I missed out on a few things, but if I don't do that, the potential for harm is great.
What's interesting is we have this very argument mentioned in our riwayat, in some of the discussions that Imam Sadiq, I believe, he has with one of these atheists. At the end of it is like, look, if God exists, we lived pretty good lives. Like, living by the religion of Islam is a very honorable life. Yeah, like you said, some pleasures, the way you excessively indulge in them, or you're allowed to, we don't. But we live pretty good lives. And if there is a hereafter, we're still very honorable, and as Sheikh said, eternal prosperity. But you don't really live too differently than me. I miss out on maybe a few little things. And but this is the interesting part. An atheist or a disbeliever misses on spiritual benefits that belief in God has. So they also
Which
do.
you didn't mention.
That's right.
Yeah.
Now, as Sheikh mentioned, this is found on the idea that we're not sure if God exists or not. But if you remember at the beginning of our discussion, we started that God exists, there is a creator, but why do I need to follow him? So we're going to modify this a little bit. And this is famously known as Pascal's wager. And we're going to modify this for the sake of our argument. We say God exists, yeah, but we're not sure if we're really going to be punished. Or let's put it this way, punished might be not the best word. That if I do not follow these instructions that he has given me, and supposedly they're there to help me, then in the hereafter, things will be very bad for me because of my own dismissal of these instructions that Allah has given, or God has given me. But I'm not sure if this will happen. And you'll be surprised that our own very Muslims have this type of mentality. Like, we'll be alright, we'll pass through. In the hereafter, we've got Imam Hussein, he will do something, he will do some abracadabra to all the sins and it's all gone. That idea actually exists. That we could sort of sin as much as we like and somehow we'll be saved. So in the back of our minds, even as Muslims and Shia sometimes, we have this idea that we'll be alright, God's on our side, don't worry about it guys. We're on the right team, he's going to pull us through. So this exists, even if subconsciously or subtly within the way we think about religion. So premise one says, we're just modifying Pascal's wager a little bit here, saying, look, I'm not sure. God's pretty merciful. I'll just say sorry. He'll be like, all right, I'll let you go and have fun in heaven, sort of thing, right? So you say, well, I'm not sure if really God, if I don't pray, He's going to punish me. Or, once again, I don't like that wording of God punishing me. It's the consequences of our own actions manifesting as these very negative outcomes in the hereafter. So if I don't pray, I'm going to face negative consequences. I'm not sure of it. I'm that type of person that, reads the Quran but is still not convinced that, not praying or lying or backbiting is actually going to lead to him suffering in hellfire. So there is a possibility of harm for me. Premise 2 says, avoiding any possible harm is the logical thing to do. The example they generally give, it's a good night to give this, it's raining, the weather's really bad, you're driving, you don't have the best of cars, if you go on this particular road, the speed is very high, the likelihood of you having a crash is very high. What's the logical thing to do here? Is to not take that route, to not go through that route that you're most likely, especially if you're using, for example, a fast bike or a fast car that's going to encourage you to go fast, you're like, the smart thing, the logical thing to do here is not to take that route. So avoiding possible harm is a logical thing to do, which we all can agree to. And in our scenario, obeying God is the logical thing to do because it avoids the possible harm. Now, so Sheikh, that was essentially a modification of Pascal's wager, but there are a few ways one can potentially question this. Do you have anything in mind?
So yeah, modifying it helps though, right? Because some of the arguments against Pascal's wager is that it doesn't prove the existence of God, which that's dismissed through this. Another one is, well, with this one, are we seeing God as Allah and the commandments as Islamic commandments?
Yeah.
Right? So if that's what we're looking at, it solves the second big argument against him as well. Because the second argument is that, look, Pascal says, if God exists, or we don't know if he exists or not, so let's act as if he exists so we could get that possible reward and protect ourselves from that possible harm. But now when you look at the world, there is a multitude of different, there's not actually a multitude of gods, but people believe in different versions of God. And then these different religions have different commandments as well. So what would acting as someone who accepts God look like if you're trying to do all of them together, right? And then that causes a big, can't think of the word, but that's confusing, right? Second one, or the third one is that, and I think this one here is important, because if we're saying we're going to obey the commandments of God just so we possibly get rewards, and we're going to stay away from haram just because possibly we'll save ourselves from hellfire. If we're not doing it sincerely, that's the issue. So with Pascal's problem, where you're acting as if you are someone who's going to believe in God, then that's an obviously insincere belief. So how could that insincere belief lead to heaven or protect you from hell? Because you're just acting, you're not actually believing, and God would be able to see your heart, and then you're done, right? But in this example, I think it's saved a little bit, because we're saying, look, I'm gonna stay away from haram just in case God will punish me for it, right? So that's why God mentions all these verses in the Quran about hellfire, is to, scare us from disobeying him, right? So it seems like it solves these problems that a lot of people have put onto Pascal. So it's taking a few steps forward helps.
Yeah, I think that should be enough. Yeah,
That should be enough.
that should be enough.
All right, we're going. All right, well, good. Alhamdulillah. There is a question. Can we say that God is the one who created us, so he should give us blessings and help, just like our parents bring us to the world as their choice, and it's their responsibility to take care of us. Let me digest that for a second.
Okay. All right. Okay. I think what's
So it's
being
God's responsibility to.
yes. So God created us. Therefore, I think this is in response to the second one, that we should be thankful to God because He gives us blessings. But the question here is, well, God has to do that. He created us. Our parents brought us into this world. They have a responsibility to take care of us because they were the ones who brought us into this world. We were tiny babies. We could not protect ourselves. We could not grow. We could not feed ourselves. It's on them to do that. And therefore, in the same format, God brought us. It's His responsibility to do that. Well, don't you thank your parents? Like, as simple as that. Like, don't you thank your parents? Just because someone had to do something, or you say they have to morally do it, does it take your responsibility from thanking them? What caused them to do it has nothing to do with your responsibility. Whatever motivation they had to help you, to give you certain blessings, does not mean your reaction to that action should change. For example, you come and give me $100 and you feel obliged to do so because Sheikh Ahmed is just an amazing person. If he doesn't help someone every day, then he feels bad about himself. Now, the fact that he feels bad about himself not helping, does that mean, oh, well, look, this is just how Sheikh Ahmed is, I'm not going to thank him when he gave me $100? Right? It makes no sense. So why he has to do what he has to do does not take away my responsibility on my part. I think that would be one way to answer it.
I think also if we look at it with the first question as well,
Okay.
like a parent gives birth to a child, now, yes, they have rights, that child has rights upon them, right? So if they don't take care of this child and they just leave it on the street alone, right, or they neglect the child, this is considered wrong, right? And there's even penal punishments for that, right? So obviously everyone would say that no, yes, you gave birth to this child, now this child has rights upon you that you must observe. But the fact that the child has rights upon you does not negate you having rights, or your, what's it called? The child, yeah, the other way around. Doesn't negate that. So just because the child has rights on the parents doesn't mean the parents have rights over the child as well, right? So yes, God created us, so it would be morally ugly for God to create us and then, treat us unfairly and, really destroy our existence in a way that would be just terrible, would be wrong for Him to do that for no purpose, right? But that doesn't negate the fact that He also has rights over us, if that makes sense.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. All right. Any other questions? Is obeying God to avoid punishment the same as obeying God to strive for paradise? Isn't this a different type of belief in God? You want to do that? The Imam Ali hadith?
No, you can do it.
So, there are different stages of faith, and those are two different ones that are mentioned. They're very similar to me. Like, I don't know if one is higher than the other, right? But with these two stages, yes, obeying God to avoid punishment is definitely one of the stages of faith that we have. And obeying God to achieve paradise is another stage of faith that we have. And they're not wrong. It's not incorrect to worship God for those reasons. It's not as if your worship will not be accepted if you're doing that, right? But there's a better form of worship, which is worshiping Allah because He deserves to be worshipped, and that is a higher level of faith, right? So that's what we should strive for. But if we're on this level where we're obeying God in order to get heaven or in order to protect ourselves from hell, that's great. Keep it up, and inshallah, you'll get those rewards, right? And there's a hadith from Imam Ali alayhi salam. I don't remember it verbatim, but it's basically, the ones who worship God for paradise are like businessmen. The ones who worship God out of fear of hell are slaves. But usually the term slave is good when it comes to iman, but in this one, not that high level of servitude, the lower level of servitude. And the third one is worshiping God as a way He should be worshipped, and those are the ahrar, the free, right? But it's a good question.
Yeah, both of them were actually great questions.
All three of them.
Santo, those three? Okay.
We answered the third one in the middle. Yeah. All right. Good. So if there's no questions, inshallah, we'll move on to the next segment, because I think Amir put the little thing on the top of the cake to tell us it's cake time, right? Is that the purpose?
They told me to put us out.
No. Well, then they were. It was him. He was telling. Anyways, inshallah, please recite salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad.
اللهم صل على محمد اللهم صل على محمد.
Thank you very much to our dear Shaykh for another engaging and interesting discussion. May Allah bless you both and grant you a place in Jannah. Please recite Allah salawat for their well-being.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
Okay, cake time. This is the fun part where none of the sisters want to come up to cut the cake. I can see one Zainab. Come on. Otherwise, no one gets cake. I will punish the whole class. I'm sure there's at least two Zainabs there. I'm waiting for a Zainab to come cut the cake. Oh, we need a knife. You're not Zainab. Huh? Oh, okay. We're waiting for a knife now. In the meantime, get your phones out and open Kahoot. We'll have the link up soon. I would do it with photography. Anyone? صل على محمد وآل محمد.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
Thank you very much, young lady, for cutting the cake. May Allah bless you. Okay, the next fun part, Kahoot. Can we have the phones out? We do have diabetes out the front to entice more people to drink. Huh?
So the expired. What be sanctioned? Crazy, that's gonna be.
Is anybody still trying to join, or are we good to start? No one's still trying to join? Alright, let's get it rolling. Where was Sayyidah Zainab born? I won't read all the options. I'm sure you guys can read. In Medina. Next question, please. 8 people got that right. Well done, the 8 people.
That's rigged. Lali's winning.
What does the name Zainab mean?
It's actually wrong. Stop miseducating.
Sheikh Ali, you will get exiled in a moment.
It's actually the name of the tree. Common mistake.
The name Zainab means adornment to her father.
It's not. Miseducating thing.
This is the last week we're going to have Sheikh Ali, by the way. How many of Sayyidah Zainab's sons died in Karbala?
It's so tragic, bro. It's a birthday.
Next question, please. Where does Sayyidah Zainab rank in age compared to Imam Hassan and Imam Hussein? Older than Imam Hassan and Imam Hussein, older than Imam Hussein but younger than Imam Hassan. Okay, that's too confusing, I'm going to stop. Good luck, guys.
One of those algebra questions. In 5 years' time.
So the correct answer is younger than Imam Hassan and Imam Hussein. Okay, I got it. Where is Sayyidah Zainab said to be buried? In Syria, Najaf, North Iran, or Lebanon? Why is the answer more specific for Iran?
Like, obviously,
In Syria.
Like Madagascar.
Who was Sayyidah Zainab's husband? Muslim ibn Aqil, Abdullah ibn Ja'far, Ja'far al-Tayyar, and Hani ibn Urwa. The correct answer is Abdullah ibn Ja'far. A lot of people got that right. That was an easy question. How old was Sayyidah Zainab when Bibi Fatima passed away? Seven is the correct answer. Everyone got it. Got it wrong. Which of these is not a known title of Sayyidah Zainab? Is not a known title of Sayyidah Zainab? Al-Tahira is not. So all the other ones are known titles of Sayyidah Zainab. Who assigned Sayyidah Zainab her name? Imam Ali, the Prophet, it was divinely appointed by Allah, or Bibi Fatima? It was divinely appointed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. How old was Sayyidah Zainab during the Battle of Karbala? 30, 37, 45, 56. 56. is the correct answer. 4 people, well done. Okay, last question. What was Sayyidah Zainab's most important role? Protecting the women of Karbala, traveling with her father, giving her khutbah in front of Yazid, or protecting the Imam/Imam? Protecting the Imam is the correct answer. She did protect the women of Karbala, but I think the Imam comes first. Okay, that's it. Here's our winners.
This is rigged. Chef, by the way. Oh yeah? That's what it's pretty much like that.
Nice. Okay. Sister Afran, which chocolate would you like? We have Kit Kat, Snickers, Toblerone, Kinder, Buenos, and Boost. The Kit Kat's the big one, if you're like lots of chocolate. Sister Fatima, that's my sister. No, that's not my sister. Sister, okay. Which chocolate should we allocate for you? Oh, that's not expired. Alright, we'll leave the best for you. No worries. And Ali Lali? No, he's in the kitchen. Was that you, Sheikh? Identity theft is not a joke. And we have, can we see the top 5? Okay, in 4th place is Brother Hayes and Z. 5th place was Z. Okay, that's it for tonight. There is a small refreshment provided, so on your way out you can grab a little pizza, and there's some drinks as well, so please help yourself on the way out. And there's also going to be cake, of course, cake is important. That's it for tonight. Thank you all for coming out and taking part in the program. To end tonight's program, Brother Amir will recite the Al-Faraj. Please welcome me with the loud salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اللهم كن لوليك الحجة ابن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرضك طوعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين صلوا على محمد وآل محمد.
Before you all leave, camp is in like a week and a half, on the 21st of December. It's going to go until, that 21st is a Tuesday, we'll return on the Friday. Registrations are still open, but I believe there's a late fee of $25. So, possible late fee, we're not sure, we think. So yeah, there is still, I think, a few spaces, but we don't expect them to be available for long, so please register as soon as you can. And also the winners can come at the front and claim their prizes.